Welcome to Beyond the Diagnosis, a series dedicated to patient stories and expert insights on Charcot-Marie-Tooth disease. Presented by the CMT Research Foundation, I'm Lily Sander, and I'm thrilled to take you beyond the diagnosis. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Beyond the Diagnosis, where we share patient stories and expert insights. Today, we are with Arthur Suckow. He co-founded DTx Pharma, a biotech company where he previously served as CEO. Last fall, he joined the CMT Research Foundation's Board of Directors, bringing his expertise to the table. Continue listening to learn more about his story and how he is using his background to advance CMT research. Artie, we're so excited to have you here today. Thank you for coming and answering our questions. You have been someone that we've been wanting to talk with and really get into the history of, so thank you.
Thanks, Lily, for having me. It's an honor to be here, and especially to do the first episode with you. I'm super excited to see what I can share with your audience.
Talk briefly about your education and what led you to DTx Pharma, and just how did we go from your early life to DTx?
Yeah, so I think maybe starting at the beginning, when growing up, I always wanted to be a doctor, like an MD doctor. And so, maybe through the end of high school and going into college, University of Delaware is where to win. I did a biology degree. There, I started doing research, and while also taking a rigorous curriculum to take the MCATs and go to med school. And at some point, it occurred to me that if I could make a drug in my career, rather than impact a couple hundred patients over the course of a lifetime, the impact of one drug could be tens of thousands of patients, millions of patients, depending on the disease that you were studying. I also was attracted to each day is different in research and science. Maybe I'm jaded. My dad's a dentist. I knew doctors growing up. It just seemed like all their days were exactly the same, like same patient, similar diagnoses if you're in a certain area. And I just didn't feel like that was the kind of impact that I wanted to have. And I also liked the challenge of new information coming at me, every day. And so I think, that undergraduate research experience at University of Delaware, while I was in the eye, not even related to, neuropathy or CMT, I just had a lot of fun doing that. And so that inspired me to move out to California, to San Diego, where I did my PhD. My PhD was in pharmacology. I did a lot of diabetes research there. I then moved to Johnson & Johnson, then AstraZeneca, then Regulus Therapeutics, which was working on kind of the RNA therapeutics, which, I believe deep down are sort of a big part of or one big pillar in curing diseases like CMT. And then I founded DTx. As with respect to the inspiration behind that, there's probably multiple layers to this. In grad school, there's this thing called the minor proposition, which is like the gatekeeper to like a mid-year or a like a midterm during the course of your PhD. And I came up with this idea. It was in Alzheimer's disease. And after I was done with it, the investigators came and they were like, we have investors that are interested in funding this. And so while that idea ended up being its own lab and such, I quickly realized that I didn't have the right experience to develop drug, didn't know the first thing about developing a drug. And so I sort of, let that go. But I knew from that moment on that I wanted to start a company. And so when I went to J&J, a big pharma, I was like, I was always thinking that the advantage of being there was that there were so many different experts in so many different areas that were important for drug development that I could learn from them. And fortunately, my mentors there supported me to take leadership roles and to learn from these people. And the same at AstraZeneca as well, where it's the second person to join that. And so maybe the last point, because I know this is a little long-winded of an answer, but the last point is it was experiences at J&J with technologies that were loosely related to what DTx developed and experiences at AstraZeneca, and then learning about RNA therapeutics at Regulus Therapeutics. It was a combination of ideas from those that sort of inspired DTx. So without getting too technical, hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, wow, you have such diverse experience, and I think that's one of the great things that you bring to the CMTRF's work. Um, would you be able to talk about a little bit about DTX and the milestones you guys have achieved since your inception, and how does that relate to CMT and CMT patients?
So I have to be a little bit careful because DTx was acquired by Novartis, but I think I can talk about the past, and I think one of the first milestones as it relates to CMT was connecting with the CMT Research Foundation. And what was the milestone there? With these platform technology companies, you're always in search for a killer application, an indication where you can stand out amongst the crowd, if you will. And maybe from that first meeting where CMT approached me, Susan, and Paul August, I knew that this could be a killer app for our technology. I didn't know that it was going to work in it, but there wasn't, as there's very few companies working on CMT. My view is that's pretty short-sighted because there's a lot of patients, there's huge unmet need and very limited competition, all recipes for success in pharma and biotech. And so, along the way, initially it's kind of, I just saw this sign the other day that said you have to crawl before you walk, and then you walk, and then you can run. And so I think we had to prove that the technology worked in mice, and there's rodent models or mouse models of this disease. And so we had to show we got to the cell that's impacted in CMT. And as you probably know as well as I do, Schwann cells and peripheral nerves are the cell types that are impacted. So we showed we could do that in mice. Some will recall that we used to have these mouse studies where the mice were limping or couldn't walk very well on a balance beam. And when you treated it with the DTx drug, after a couple of weeks time, you could actually get them to walk almost normal without, like a normal or a wild type mouse. So that was it. And then of course there's, a big part of drug development is safety.
Yes.
And pharmacology. And so we had to go through a series of rodent and primate, non-human primate, we probably normally would refer to those as monkeys, safety studies, and also studies to show that the drug, got to those Schwann cells, got to those nerves in those studies. And that was sort of where Novartis took over. And I'm sure you're going to ask me where Novartis is at right now. I just can tell you basically that they're working really hard to fill in gaps in our knowledge and to make solidify the foundation, all data that will drive them into the clinic. And at least as far as I know, they're planning to move into the clinic maybe later this year, early next year. And Bob Balo there, who we trust quite a bit, is doing from what I can tell, a great job stewarding this and generating the right data to justify putting this into patients.
Wow. Yeah, at the conference that the CMTRF hosted back in, what was it, September, a scientist and researcher showed me videos of those mice, and I was completely blown away. And I was just so excited at the prospect of even having rodent models with CMT in them. Like even 10 years ago, we didn't really talk about that. And so that leads me to my big question here of what do you feel the value is of pharmaceutical companies like DTX and Novartis collaborating with patient organizations like the CMTRF? How do you see us really driving that path to a cure forward?
Yeah, the way that I look at CMTRF is, you have to pour a little bit of gasoline on, I don't know, into the cars or into the engines, to get groups activated. And so I think, what can CMT RF do to inspire more DTXs? I would say, well, sorry, my phone is ringing. I would say that they have to educate, small companies like DTX. Like there's actually most of the companies that I work with, I'm a venture partner at RA Capital. And then of course, a lot of people ask me for advice these days. They're these platform technologies looking for the killer app. And so I think CMTRF and has to be proactive in letting them know that this indication exists. There's huge unmet need, and where it's a state-of-the-art technology, where we have believe that it can work in those technologies, we've got to convince those companies to start working on those drugs. Do we have to fund those companies? Sometimes, to get them to do it. But I think first and foremost, we have to go to them and tell them how exciting of a disease this is for a biotech company. And not only is it unmet need, not only is it that the clinical path is viable, because over the last 10 years, there's been, I'm sure, doctors that you've met, like Mike Shy, Steve Scherer, Herman. These folks have done a great job, making sure that when drugs get to them, they know what to do with them. They know how to, characterize, how your patient walking, balance, strength, biomarkers in the clinic. So I think first and foremost, we need to educate the companies. I think the other thing, or the way that I think I can help the most is that I know CMT pretty well. I know most of the CMTs now pretty well. And the truth is there's a whole white space ahead of us in terms of technologies out there that belong and deserve a fair shake in CMT. And so I think what I see my role is, with Ryan and others at the CMTRF, is mapping out what are the companies with technologies that are state of the art, and which ones make sense to go and attract to the different CMTs. Like we go through like a matching exercise, like this technology goes with 1A, this technology goes with 1E, this technology goes with 2A. And so I think we have to be very proactive in, we can't wait for the companies to come to us. So I think, right. and then I think obviously, CMTRF can also do experiments or work with these companies along the way to introduce them to KOLs, to introduce them to investors that we know like DTX. So I don't know, that those are some of the ways that I think CMTRF can collaborate.
Yeah, and I feel like, you truly described it as a symbiotic relationship between these pharmaceutical technology companies and patient advocacy groups. And in my experience, it hasn't always been seen in that light. So I think it's a really important point that we need to work together to get what we both want. We want a cure, and this is how we're going to find a cure. So
I think maybe, can I add one more thing quickly?
Yeah.
I think one of the other things that helps is, like, if you read an article about CMT relative to other indications, some people will read that article and it's a little superficial. It comes across as, oh, it's a lifestyle disease, not really a big disease. But I think one of the places it really helps is if you meet the patient and you understand the experience, it's real to you. And so, people assume that, these preclinical researchers are like, get to meet all the patients. No, we're reading like 2 paragraphs of something that described the disease. And not that doesn't always capture the patient experience. So I think maybe one of the things that, helped inspire me was getting to meet, the patient and have, understand what their day-to-day challenges are like and such. So I think that's I maybe missed that as at least an important part of the equation of inspiring people who are going to have to talk to investors, who are going to, in some ways poo-poo because they only read those 2 paragraphs. If the investor met the patient, they'd get it.
Right. I think there is just such a it's such an egregious misunderstanding between these two parts of the equation. We have the patients and we have the people searching for whatever's going to help us, a treatment, a cure. And so I think places like the CMTRF Foundation, their conferences every year, I think those are just essential. I meeting researchers, I was so excited to meet the people that were working tirelessly in labs and who were dealing with the science behind it. But they shared that they were equally as excited to meet patients and to see how the disease manifests itself in a real person, not a mouse or a cell model. And so I think that is something that we need to learn and expand upon. Um, and so I'm curious, you talked a little bit about the patient aspect, the science aspect kind of coming together. What truly motivated you to take that step and to join the CMTRF's board of directors?
Yeah, I mean, I think in a nutshell, it probably comes down to people and relationships. I think, over the years that I um, was working on DTX, I came to know, the CMT community reasonably well. And, what kept us going at DTX was, the first, patient that really um, I just remember so well was Stella, and then there was
Mhm.
Carter. Obviously, we met last year, and I think that I spent all this time working on this disease. I also promised patients, that I wouldn't retire until this disease is cured. Obviously, I'm helping in different ways now, but for me, um, make developing all these friendships both with parents and patients and such, inspired me. I also thought that I could bring. I I hoped that DTX lived through the hardest part of attracting investors and pharma to CMT. But if they didn't, that very real experience around trying to, raise large sums of money for the first time in an indication like CMT, I thought I could bring that experience to the table to help other companies. As we were, talking about before the call, um, even though we're all hoping that DTX's drug is the cure for 1A, right? The odds are stacked against it, right? Typically, a drug at DTX's stage has maybe a 5%, 10% chance of making it all the way to the clinic. And so we need more. I wanted to help us get more shots on goal, 9, 10 shots on goal. And I think the other piece of it was that because there's such a white space here, there's so many technologies that deserve a shot in CMT. I just thought I could have maybe an outsized impact here versus doing this for something else. So I think that was a big part of it. And of course, I developed, relationships with, members of the CMTRF and the patient community. So that the honest truth is that's why I've titrated back, but I'm still spending like some of these days 4 and 5 hours on CMTRF these days. So, but that's why.
Yeah, and I think again, having those personal connections are essential to the goal that we all have, which is a treatment and a cure. Um, and so I think that's one of the great strengths of the CMTRF is the relationships between the community and the ambassador programs and the board of directors. And I feel like that is part of the magic of it. So I'm wondering, in your eyes, what do you how do you see the CMTRF playing a crucial role in right now we're working on ending 1A. How do you see them really driving that forward and pioneering this effort?
I mean, I think what's I hope is unique about the CMTRF is we don't wait for the scientists to come to us. We go on offense. We map the landscape of the CMTAs prospectively, understand what are the best treatments for the different CMTs. And then we bring the problem and the science to the scientists or to the company. That's not to say that you can't come in other ways. We welcome people with new ideas and such, but I think we're, the organization was founded upon not waiting for the science to come to us. So I think, that is what differentiates us from hopefully other folks or other folks trying to do the same thing. I think the other thing that helps is that, and maybe it's unique to CMT, but the reality is, as you know, there's not enough research, there's not enough shots on goal. And so, there's a singular focus on that. I think that's really that single goal. And I think that makes sense for now. Ultimately, when we get into the clinic, we may need to do some other, things beyond just the research. Maybe we have to support development and stuff, but for now, that singular mission is critical.
All right. So now I'm really curious as a patient to know of anything you can tell us about the specific efforts that the CMTRF is pushing forward right now.
Yeah, I think I know there's a lot of things that I'm excited about, at a high level, and then even maybe digging in. So I think one of the biggest challenges or fundamental challenges with maybe not 1A, but the others is that, gene therapy, which is a way to replace, genes that are acting up, or to supplement with a normal copy or a normally functioning copy of the gene. I think, behind the scenes with what we call the Research Advisory Committee, have aligned that in order to be successful, to unlock the potential to treat, 1B, X, maybe E, and some of the twos, we really need to have, intensive effort devoted to gene therapies for Schwann cells for peripheral nervous system. And so we've been organizing, a lot of sessions, a lot of thoughts on how do we, leverage some of the learnings recently of driving delivery to the brain for gene therapy and get the attention onto Schwann cells. So I think that's a really that. If we could break that open, like a safe delivery of gene therapy to Schwann cells in a somewhat specific way, all of a sudden we're talking about not just curing 1A, we're talking about potentially just going down the list and probably picking them off. So I think we need to have, intensive effort and bring the best of the best around the table to tackle that. So I think that's an initiative. Clearly will yell at me if that's confidential, but I don't think it is. And then two, I think the other thing we've been thinking about more and more is we do have some really good scientists around the board. We just hired Ryan, and we've actually talked about whether or not we should be doing some of the killer experiments, whether those get spun out into new companies or whether those, are data that the existing portfolio of companies can use as inspiration or fuel to keep going. But we want to try to be a role model to support these companies and also to inspire them. And we already have, we have several scientists, several leaders, several CEOs around the table that have been there and done this before. So we're starting to think, why shouldn't we at least think about, doing this? Maybe we can go faster,
Right.
et cetera. And then, maybe it's obvious, but, where we build these, I don't know, the group I work for, we call it like a roadmap, where we build these roadmaps, we're bringing these ideas to the scientists, particularly scientists that are maybe biotech inclined, not academic in nature, people who want to take ideas and make them drugs, not just ask us a question about a mechanism or something like that. They're inclined to move as fast as you can to bring a drug. So those are three areas. I think, going into the September um, board meeting and the next campaign, I'd be surprised if those weren't themes that are brought to the level. And I would just say that the recent additions to the CMTRF of Toby and Grace Pavlev, Toby Ferguson, really have raised our game and our ability to find companies and ideas that we should be mining and pushing forward.
And again, I think that having the best of the best around the table, I think that's one of the great strengths of this organization, and having the scientific board of directors and just having all of these minds collaborate, especially at the conferences too. But switching to kind of the patient side, I know you talked about how energizing that the experience of meeting patients and parents and people involved in patient advocacy groups such as the CMTRF, how that has really affected you. So could you talk a little bit more about what the most just exciting and energizing, fulfilling experience has been so far for you on that side?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say there's a lot. I think one of the really cool things that happens, from time to time when I'm at fundraisers and such is someone will pull me aside and just be like, thank you. And, in some cases, they'll go on, I don't want to like out anyone, but they'll go on to say, you know, I tried this or I did this because I knew that we had hope, right? And I don't, just the fact, even though they know that there's some risk in what DTX did, it may not translate. That they did something they may not have done 5 years ago, or that it impacted them in such a way. It's something that I don't think I ever appreciated would happen. So I think that's important. That has like certainly keeps me motivated. I think hearing, so that's probably high on the energizing experiences. I think the other thing is hearing, like at DTX, drug development is really, really hard. And there's probably more bad days than good days,
Mhm.
or days where you're really confused. And so one of the things that the CMT community, did for us is they would send us letters on their stories, their disease process, how it impacts them, how they're doing. And, we created a wall at DTX. And so why was that so helpful? It's because when there are hard days and it was like, should we just give up? This is too hard. You look at those stories and you're like, no, I'm going to keep going because these people are rooting for us. And so, I think those are two of many awesome experience that I never would have expected. Even when we started or at any point during the way. But I don't think I could underestimate like how energizing or how valuable those were to keep DTX going in CMT. And even now when I think to why am I still involved with CMTRF, you know even in the hardest moments in the boardroom and stuff, I'm like, okay, close my eyes, that's why. Right. That's why.
Yeah, I think that's incredible, but I love how you talk about those energizing moments with patients, but from a patient perspective, I feel the same way meeting people who are in the lab or leading companies that are working on this disease. It gives us hope, and I think it gives us kind of just this thing to look forward to in the future. Obviously, we know that we are a long way. We need more funding and we need more research and we need more people working on this. But just to have a room full of researchers, like for instance at the conference, I think that is just one of the best experiences to just see both sides of it and see that we have people working on it. And so I think that is just invaluable to our success. And my last question for you is, what is your message to those at home that are just patiently, anxiously waiting for a treatment or a cure to develop? What kind of hope can you give us for the future?
Yeah, I mean, I think my first message is don't wait, do something about it. And so I think if you use the story of DTX and CMTRF, right, a group of patients came together knowing that a huge gap in why there's no treatments is because no one's trying to inspire research, no one's bringing the science to the people. And so I would say don't wait, and that could be as simple as sharing your story with a company that's working on the disease. So Actio is working on CMT, Applied is working on a sword. There's Artys, there's others. Like, let them know how important their efforts are and the potential impact that they could have. So I would say that. I mean, the other thing I would say is that it's really, I mean, I used to say, so this is like the decade of RNA therapeutics, and these
Yeah.
kinds of technologies that are fit for a disease or diseases like CMT are starting to come online now. They're starting to go into the clinic, and we're starting to see success. So while we haven't seen success in the clinic, with CMT just yet, although we did see success with Sword, which isn't so distant, uh, like they're starting to come online. Like for DM1, these companies, Dyne and Avidity, they had some success in DM1, and those are the exact kinds of technologies that are going to be so valuable to CMT. So I think the other thing is, I think we are starting to, on gene therapies, the other, thing that is sort of going to be one of the big pillars to unlocking this, there, even though you talk to an investor or farmer right now and they would say, oh, gene therapy is on the way out, I think we're kind of at the very beginning of exponential growth and interest in gene therapies and some new breakthroughs um, that'll come away. And a lot of that was founded on some of the data that came out of the more recent failures. So I don't know. I'm, as Cleary or anyone will tell you, I just see a huge amount of white space, technologies that are maturing, that are fit for at least some of the CMTs right now, and other maybe immature technologies where I could see investment resulting in unlocking other CMTs. So I think we should be really excited. I think maybe, I don't know if this is going to come across as selfish, but I think DTX, if we did anything, we shined a light on CMT and allowed investors and pharma, through Novartis and maybe others, that there could be a win-win situation here. A drug for patients plus a commercially successful drug. So I don't know. I'm very optimistic about the future of CMT research. It is going to take patience. I don't think we're going to have a drug in 3 years approved, but hopefully a couple things in the clinic, and over the next decade, we'll start to be saying, well, CMT1A is good, another CMT is good, and then over the next 2 decades, we won't. But I don't know. I as you know, I see a lot of white space and a lot of reasons to be optimistic.
And
But
I
we
think,
also need a lot of money. We need a lot of money to fuel this.
no, we need a huge amount of money and patient support. And so I think that, again, we're coming to our theme of collaboration between companies, between patient groups, but also between patients. And so, like you said, I think it's important for CMT patients to go out and live their lives and not wait around for a drug. Um, it's been coming and coming and coming, but we have to be able to live while we are anticipating this. Arthur, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Thank you for giving us your insights and for being our first ever guest.
Well, thank you for having me. This is so fun. And if there's any ways I can be helpful in the future, please don't hesitate to reach out.
Beyond the Diagnosis is brought to you by the CMT Research Foundation, dedicated to research, committed to a cure. For more information on Charcot-Marie Tooth disease, please visit us online at cmtrf.org.